If I were asked what it means to be British, I'd suggest it used to be fairness, and now it is tolerance. In a similarly simplistic way, we might characterise Germans as being industrious, as French as living to the full, and Italians as looking good. In New Testament times, the Romans borrowed their culture from the Greeks, for whom the most admirable quality was hospitality. This Greek and Roman emphasis was something that Jews could agree with. They placed the same value on hospitality to strangers that many nomadic Arab tribes still honour. They welcome a traveller without hesitation. Abraham is the role model for both Jews and Arabs. When he saw 3 strangers some distance from his tent, he ran to greet them, despite it being very hot, and persuaded them to eat with him. He organised bread and cheese and milk while they waited for the lamb to roast. And he didn't talk with them about their business until after they'd eaten, which was a rule in Greek culture too. In Hebrews we read that the moral of the story: do not forget to show hospitality to strangers, for by so doing some people have shown hospitality to angels without knowing it. 2 of those 3 strangers turned out to be the 2 angels who continued on to visit Lot, and the 3rd appears to have been God in some physical manifestation, because it says Abraham remained standing before the Lord. Some stories in the Gospels make more sense when we realise the importance of hospitality. Getting your neighbour out of bed to lend you food for a midnight supper seems ludicrous, unless you have found someone who needs hospitality. Jesus is able to assure his disciples that they will receive hospitality when he sends them to preach in the villages. He even warns them not to take up a second offer if it is better than the first. Stay there. Do not move around from house to house. No, this isn't forbidding door-to-door evangelism. Hospitality was especially important for Christians in the Roman world. This wasn't problematic most of the time, but emperors Caligula, Nero and Hadrian were particularly paranoid, and even Jews could be dangerous sometimes. Peter, who wrote to a community suffering persecution, had to remind his flock to offer hospitality to one another without grumbling. The word for hospitality is philoxenos, that is, love of the stranger. It's the opposite to xenophobia, meaning fear of the stranger, which we know all too much about today. In our culture, there's a very real and practical hindrance to our practice of hospitality. It isn't that we don't have enough food, or that we don't have a spare couch. It is that we own too many precious things, and we fear they will be misused or stolen. It's a sad fact that when a homeless person looks for a bed or couch, they're much more likely to find hospitality in a 1-bedroom flat than in a 4-bedroom house. So many of today's displaced immigrants are Christians, though there are also other religious groups fleeing hatred that's been stirred up in their home cultures. Jesus doesn't call us just to love ourselves, but to love our potential enemies too. Many in our grandparents' generation didn't lock their doors, and they knew their neighbours well enough to offer help when needed as friends. In contrast, our generation complains that the government doesn't arrange enough help for the elderly people who live alone, perhaps on our street. Our lonely neighbours usually only need a coffee and a chat and perhaps some shopping, which is much easier than the hospitality that the Bible asks us to give to complete strangers. God bless.